Morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to welcome you to the UIA World Architecture Day 2021 webinar, Clean Environment for a Healthy World. President of UIA, Mr. José Luis Cortés, would you please open the session and give words of welcome?
Thank you, Martha. Well, hello everybody. Today is a great day. It's the World Architecture Day. We are on a big celebration. So first of all, on the name of the Union of International Architects, I want to congratulate all the architects around the world. We have a high responsibility for the future, and I am sure that this webinar will help us a lot with the help of all the experts in public health. I want to thank all the speakers, the moderator, Martha Thorne. I will not introduce the speakers, Miss Martha will do it, but I want to say two things. One, as you know, the clean environment for a healthy world has to start from our houses. We have to clean our houses. We have to clean our neighborhood. We have to clean our town. We have to clean our municipality and our state. We have to clean our country in order to clean the planet. So we have to work all together. And we are working with the same agenda of United Nations for 2030. So we have 10 years until the year 2030 in order to make our task. It is a big challenge, but I'm sure that if everybody helps, we are able to clean our planet. And that's our main goal. As you have read some days ago, the Secretary General of United Nations, at the General Assembly mentioned Mr. Antonio Guterres that to all the leaders of the world that we are in a very difficult situation. That is the highest crisis of our age. So this is very serious topic, and he make the alarm, for the after this pandemic time, to challenge what are we going to do with all the different disasters that we have had around the world with the climate change. As you know, in Milano, 400 young people got together last week, and our great speaker, Greta Thunberg, 18 years old, representing all the young people, she said, we have been for 30 years just with blah, 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 blah. And she said, we cannot continue, like that, she said to all the world leaders. So we have to do something. We have to make specific targets, year by year in order to get for 2030 to a better world. Greta mentioned that 1,000 million children and young people will suffer from the climate change. So this is a very serious problem, and it's important that the young people, there are many activists that are taking this flag. So we have to join the young generations in order to work together with all the other disciplines, with all the politicians from different parties, and we have to pay attention that this is a problem for everybody. And so I encourage all the architects to do our best in order to help humanity in the next 10 years and to collaborate for a better planet. Thank you very much. I congratulate all of you for participating in this webinar, and I thank very much one and each of the speakers, great speakers we have. Thank you, Martha.
Thank you very much, President Cortés. And it is my pleasure and privilege to introduce our speakers today. For those of you who may not know me, I am Dean at IE School of Architecture and Design in Madrid. And one of the pillars of our education is learning from other disciplines and realizing that the connection to the built environment comes in many ways. So it's especially a privilege to introduce our speakers because they do come from different fields, but they all bring very deep insights and understanding about this huge topic of creating a healthy world. And I think we're all inspired by the Hippocratic Oath of do no harm. And doing no harm can come from medicine, it can come from architecture, it can come from sustainability specialists, it can come from politicians. And each of our speakers has a different point of view, but I'm sure all our listeners will see that they are very much connected and in collaboration. Our keynote is Dr. Margaret Chan. And Dr. Chan, it's a privilege to welcome you from the People's Republic of China. Dr. Chan received her medical degree from the University of Western Ontario in Canada. And back in 1978, she joined the Hong Kong Department of Health. In 1994, she was appointed Director of Health of Hong Kong. And when she was working as director, she launched new services to prevent the spread of disease and promote better health. In 2003, Dr. Chan joined WHO, as director for the Department of Protection of the Human Environment. And in 2005, she was appointed Director, Communicable Diseases Surveillance and Response. She was also named Assistant Director General for Communicable Diseases. And on April 20th, as if Dr. Chan is not to be stopped, she's continually taking on new challenges. She was appointed as inaugural dean of the Vanke School of Public Health at Tsinghua University, China. Dr. Chan will give the keynote, but I will introduce our other speakers so as not to interrupt the flow of the presentations. Our second speaker today is Dr. Maria Neda. She's Director of Department of Environment, Climate Change and Health of WHO, the World Health Organization. And she has held that position since 2005. She's led and advised on policy and management in key areas of environmental health. And prior to her appointment at WHO, she was Undersecretary of Health and President of the Spanish Food Safety Agency. And it's a pleasure to have Dr. Neda here. I feel very close to her, although we're not in the same city right now. But being someone who contributed so much to Spain and beyond, it's a privilege to welcome her. She has many distinctions and has been awarded the Médaille de l'Ordre National du Mérite by the government of France, and also received the Extraordinary Woman Award by Her Majesty Queen Letizia of Spain. And in 2019, she was nominated as a top 100 policy influencer in health and climate change. Today, our third speaker will be Tommy Valdez. He's president of the Society of Filipino Foresters, and he's a staunch advocate of sustainable forestry, knowing the importance and the power of sustainably managed forests to contribute to both people and planet and bolster livelihoods. He's in his third term as council president of the foresters, and he is also connected with the San Roque Power Corporation. He's vice president of corporate affairs. Now, this power corporation is the largest in the Philippines and the third largest in Asia. Tommy Valdez is a registered environmental planner. He has a degree in forestry, a master in philosophy and resource management and planning. And he is therefore a very well-rounded and influential person, not only in his home country of Philippines, but beyond. Our fourth speaker, we have Richard Dottie, and he graduated from the University of Science and Technology in Kumasi, Ghana, and was co-winner of the Frank Lloyd Wright Prize in Architecture 1979. Architect Dottie, welcome. and it's a pleasure to have you here. He was elected president of the Ghana Institute of Architects in 2018. And in 2019, he was appointed board chairman of the Registration Council, a very important position for all of us in the field of architecture. But not only that, for the past 16 years, he's managed and executed a number of projects in the health sector in Ghana. Notable among these are district hospitals for Bekwa and Tarkwa, the blood processing center in Korlebu, Accra, and the first purpose-designed 100-bed infectious disease center in Accra, which was especially important to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. And last but certainly not least is Ray Pentecost, who's coming to us from Texas. Ray is the director of the Center for Health Systems and Design at Texas A&M University, the College of Architecture. He's a fellow of both the American Institute of Architects and the American College of Healthcare Architects, a LEED accredited professional and an ordained minister. Ray trained in architecture at Rice University. He earned public health degrees at the University of Texas, and he studied gerontology at University of Texas School of Nursing, and he is also an ordained minister. So without further ado, my warmest welcome to all speakers. And Dr. Chan, if you would like to start off with the keynote address, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dean Thorne, UIA President, dear friends, participants, ladies and gentlemen. I wish to thank the organizers for the invitation, but it is more important for me to congratulate you all for this timely webinars on World Architecture Day. The theme for 2021 is Clean Environment for a Healthy World. Well, I can recognize that the list of distinguished speakers, I only know Maria, because both of us work in the sphere of public health. Not being an architect, I will focus my intervention on two aspects. The first one is the impact of COVID-19 on the built environment in the cities. And the second aspect is the health co-benefits of the green building movement on climate change. As we all know and agree, particularly the public health experts, the current pandemic is unprecedented in terms of its speed of transmission, in terms of its scale and its duration. The public health measures are vital to contain the transmission of the viruses. However, the lockdown and social distancing have major impacts on the way we live, work, play, and interact with people in the built environment, both indoor and outdoor spaces. Some classical environmental hygiene, like optimal air exchange, adequate space for privacy and comfort, safe water supply, proper solid waste, and wastewater management are implicated during the current pandemic. First, let me talk about crowding. Close proximity to other people, especially without masks, emerged very early as a risk factor for disease transmission. On average, people spend 60 to 80% of their time at home, and it has increased to 100% during lockdowns. Crowding at home is common, therefore, during lockdowns or stay-at-home orders. Co-presence of sick individuals during home isolation, represent a big challenge in managing space, water and food supply, solid waste, medical waste, and wastewater. Other crowded indoor places like the workplace, churches, hospitals, dormitories, restaurants, marketplaces, and even the prisons were implicated in these outbreaks. Overcrowding outdoor settings, like in sports stadium, outdoor concerts, theme parks are also a risk factor for disease transmission, especially when people do not wear masks. One can imagine the challenges in overcrowded cities like Hong Kong, where I'm living, like Bangkok, Tokyo, not to mention cities like Mumbai, Nairobi, and Karachi, where substantial parts of the city consist of slums. Second, poor air circulation in an indoor space increases the risk of exposure to airborne aerosols. When people breathe, when people talk, if they are sick, there is a high chance that this individual is spreading the disease through aerosols. Now, it is recommended that, of course, during the pandemic, we should increase the supply of outdoor air. We should limit air recirculation and increase air filtration, etc. Less costly mitigation measures include opening windows and using fans. And major improvements, which is almost impossible during this 20-month pandemic, to heating, to ventilation and air conditioning system. Not only can they be costly and time-consuming, and they are difficult to operate. And moreover, the current heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems are designed to manage temperature, humidity, and contaminants level under, let me repeat, under non-pandemic conditions. So in other words, the pandemic changes the equation. And it is important for architects to realize going forward what kind of ventilation system, what kind of heating or air conditioning system that you can have some kind of flexibility to allow for such unpleasant situation like the pandemic. Whether we like it or not, we're going to face another pandemic. I mean, this is life. And I have seen far too many pandemics in my short 40 years of public health. Now, let me turn to poor design or poor maintenance. Disease transmission has been reported due to poor design of wastewater pumping and maintenance of the bathroom drains during SARS in 2003 and the current COVID pandemic in Hong Kong. Now, of course, in 2003, right after the outbreak, we recommended changing the design of the wastewater pumping so that new buildings can accommodate this recommendation. But we also recommended public health for good maintenance of bathroom drains are also important and should be promoted in 2003. And for the same reason, it is being promoted currently during this pandemic. What about working at home? COVID-19 brought a very large-scale shift to working from home for those whose job permits it. As the pandemic evolved, discussions on future work models is well underway. Many employers announced plans for large-scale, long-term shifts towards teleworking. But let's be frank, some employments still require in-person operations, and some others prefer a hybrid model. we are now more than 20 months into the pandemic. This shift or this change of working at home and the convenience of interacting with colleagues globally via webinars, as we are doing now, will no doubt require architects and all of us to rethink what is the future role of the office. Now, indeed, the current pandemic has prompted a number of ambitious proposals by architects for the built environment in the future. For example, designing homes with swing space to accommodate both living and working, with innovative heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems to reduce disease transmission. In addition, let's not forget the mental stress of people during lockdown. And that also increased the demand for more outdoor space, green space, more fresh air, and parks, both for physical activities and mental well-being. Now, let me turn to the last point I wish to make. It is in connection with the green building movement on climate change. Climate change is the defining issue for the 21st century. Extreme weather events are the new normals, giving rise to floodings, forest fires, etc. And many of these events cause life loss. So the green building movement is one of the many initiatives contributing to mitigate climate change. Buildings consume nearly 40% of primary energy and are responsible for 30% of energy-related greenhouse gas emissions globally. Therefore, it is entirely understandable that energy efficiency has dominated the discussion in the green building movement. Buildings constructed today will be in use for decades to come. And as such, as I said, every 10 or so years, we will see major outbreaks. So if indeed buildings are for decades, so we need to get prepared as well. So decisions about the design and the energy efficiency measures will substantially influence progress on mitigating climate change. The green building movement includes standards for indoor air quality, acoustic, and lighting. Studies in green buildings have found that some consistent findings of what we call health co-benefits. Health co-benefits for the occupants because they suffer less sick building syndrome, fewer asthma hospitalizations, they are more productive, and the cognitive tests, they perform much better. We allege this to be improvements in ventilation, in the chemical concentrations inside the building, and of course, the lighting. So architects have a major contribution to make because buildings that we live in can have direct effects or indirect effects on human health. So the health co-benefit of energy efficient building or green building should be considered during the drafting of policies and the design of new buildings, right at the beginning. Don't involve the architects too late. We, in public health, we would like an integrated, multidisciplinary approach and systems thinking in modern city planning. In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, the pandemic offers many lessons learned for years to come for practitioners in many areas, including for the architects. It also offers an historic opportunity for us to be creative, to harness emerging innovation and technology to make modern city planning and green housing healthy, safe, and sustainable. On that, let me thank you
Thank you very much, Dr. Chan. Very inspiring. Let's move right on to Dr. Maria Neda, who will address us for about 10 minutes on urban health. Dr. Neda, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Martha, and thank you as well for the invitation, and very, very happy day to the architects. I am married to one, so I know the importance of that. So we are celebrating at home today. Let me start maybe where Dr. Chan left on the importance of this connection on urban health planning and public health community. How now, because of the COVID-19 recovery, because we need to make sure that we will reduce our vulnerability vis-a-vis new crisis, why this interconnection, this intersectoriality between the public health community and the urban community has to be even stronger. I have prepared a PowerPoint presentation, but I will not even go through that. If you can share it with the participants, I can be very happy, and then they can have a look at that. But let me, instead of that, just share some thoughts with you on opportunities and how we can move and scale up the collaboration here. One, let me start by saying that only a few days ago, WHO launched the new revised air quality guidelines. And as you probably heard before, and I hope you heard that before, more than 90% of the global population living in cities particularly are now breathing air that is not respecting the proposed levels of exposure that is recommending WHO. And with the new guidelines, what we are doing is that we are recommending even lower levels of exposure to 6 key pollutants. We need to reduce those the exposure to those 6 key pollutants, particularly PM2.5, which, as you certainly know, is very harmful for our health. If we want to do that, no doubt we need to work with you. And you need to help us very much on the way you will be designing the new buildings, the way you will be doing a healthy urban planning, because we need to reduce the exposure of pollution. So we need to make sure that in the cities where most of the population will be living in 20 years from now, 70% of the world population will be living there, we need to collaborate on having green spaces in our cities. We need to accelerate this transition to renewable, clean sources of energy. It's important to have energy efficiency, as mentioned by Dr. Chan, is extremely important, but it's extremely important to stop using the combustion of fossil fuels. We need to accelerate on a very ambitious and quick way this transition to healthy, cleaner, renewable sources of energy. And for that, your creativity, your technology, your planning, and this intersectorial capacity is extremely important, accompanied by the green spaces and the healthy planning at the city level, where we can put the citizen at the center and not the car. At the moment, the cities, I'm sure it's not your fault, but most of the cities are now planned for the cars, for parking space, for cars, but not for humans. So we don't have a possibility to have a healthy, active lifestyle. We have a sedentary lifestyle, we have traffic incidents, we have exposure to air pollution, and no connectivity, social interaction, and therefore suffering as well our mental health. And our global health priorities are very much in line with the non-communicable diseases and this issue of air pollution. So our strong, please have a look at the new air quality guidelines and see how can you help the governments to put in place, depending on which city, what are the measures that we need to accelerate in order to reduce air pollution. Second point I would like to share with you, in few weeks from now, very few weeks from now, we will be having the COP26 in Glasgow. And I don't want to quote Greta. I think it's terrible what she says, and then the blah, blah, blah is something that is clearly something that should force all of us to think a little bit and reflect and accelerate action and prove them, the kids, that we are not just a blah, blah, blahs, that we have to very concrete actions to propose. But in fact, if you look at the COP26, it means that this is the number 26. So for 26 years, we have been attending COPs, talking and exchanging, and still, not taking the actions that is needed, at least at the level that the public health community needed, because we can't afford to have 7 million premature deaths caused by air pollution every year. We can't afford it. And if we implement the Paris Agreement, the mitigation of climate change, the health benefits that we will be obtained are enormous. So one of the key measures we need to take are related to traffic, are related to transport, a more sustainable transport system at the city level, a more sustainable public transport system. And on that, the architects are part of this design as well, and will help us on making sure that this will be more sustainable and less damaging for our health. We need to accelerate, of course, the transition to healthy food systems. And we need to make sure that we accelerate this healthy urban planning transition. And on that, again, our collaboration will be fantastic. Two initiatives that we are proposing, and I will stop here. One is in collaboration with the UK government and the Italian government, the ones that are co-hosting the COP26. We are committed, and there are very serious commitments now by countries to reduce the carbon emissions of the healthcare systems around the world. And as you know, the health systems, not all of them, of course, the ones of the rich countries or developed countries, we are contributing between 5 and 10% of the global carbon emissions. And so it means that if the health systems globally, they were a country, there will be the country number 5 in terms of contribution. What means that is that we need you architects to help us to design healthcare facilities, hospitals, and health systems that will be more resilient to climate change, of course, better adapted in terms of water resources, energy resources, and making sure that we can create a zero carbon system. UK has committed in 20 years from now, there will be zero carbon. And we are mobilizing as many countries as possible to reach that level in order to prove that this is a very serious and concrete commitment. The second one is about helping developing countries who are not contributing at all by having emissions, at the contrary, to reach access to electricity, to green sources of energy by solar panels. I mean, we are having an initiative at the healthcare facilities on solar panels, and this is moving very well. I don't have time now to explain you, but we want to accelerate that electrification of healthcare facilities using renewable sources of energy. And again, the design of that will be critically important. I still have 2 minutes, which I will use for saying that first, we are not lacking evidence. We have plenty of arguments proving that the connection between urban planning and housing is fundamental to our health. In fact, in WHO, we have guidelines on housing and health, and guidelines, of course, on urban health and air pollution and many other initiatives. So evidence is not what we are missing. Tools is not what we are missing. We have developed, how to integrate health and the urban planning. I'm sure you are aware of all of those tools, documents that are on my PowerPoint presentation. We have been working with UN Habitat, ICLEI, mayors around the world, and we will be very happy to join forces with you. And through that, on our networks at COP and others, make sure that the health argument will be the one motivating more action in climate change. And by doing so, maybe in 1 year, be able to do what the environmental community has not been able to do it in 26. I know that this is very ambitious, but I always think that the health is one of the strongest motivator for mobilizing the communities, for engaging people, and for making sure that everybody will realize that climate change is not just polar bears, but is amide lands. And the moment a mom realized that the asthma of their kids is related to the air pollution, don't worry, they will move, and they will move mountains if needed. So thank you very much for this opportunity. And again, a pleasure to be with you, and congratulations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Naida. You've given us lots of food for thought, and at the end, I'm sure we'll have questions for you. If we could move on now to Mr. Tommy Valdez. And Mr. Valdez, coming to us from the Philippines, and you're going to speak about carbon neutrality in a post-COVID-19 world. The floor is yours. Thank you. And you need to connect your microphone so we can hear you.
Sure. Yeah, I'll share my my presentation. Arcel, wala. Wait, I just need to share my. Open siya. Ito. Wala eh. Having trouble here. I need to share my presentation, but it's not appearing in my screen. Let me try once again. Oops. Sorry, can I take the next presentation?
Sure, sure. I think Mr. Dottie, would you mind presenting now? And Mr. Valdez, we will come back to you and hear more about carbon neutrality. Mr. Dottie,
Yeah.
do you mind presenting?
Yes, it's fine. I can do that now. Yes.
Yeah, thank you so
But,
much. That's what we call flexibility and adaptation to any risk.
Yeah, thank you very much. And hello, everybody. Yeah, listening to the keynote address and Maria Neira, both of them summarized the challenges that face architects. There's this famous quotation by Norman Foster, and I'll say it because of relevance here. It says that as an architect, you design for the present with an awareness of the past for a future that is essentially unknown. Now, this is a challenge that we've faced all the time, and it's even more relevant in these COVID times. I'm talking to you on a design for healthcare. A lot of the design for healthcare is for healthcare facilities and also things that we do outside the facilities just to improve the general public health. Now, health facilities are first and foremost centers for healing, and by extension must not be conduits for spread of disease. The big question is, can we design for healthcare to reduce the spread of disease? For me, the answer is a resounding yes, we can. This presentation will focus on the design of healthcare facilities in the context of COVID-19, which is the topical issue now. And I will do my best to cover the essentials within the 10 minutes that I have. A large part of this presentation is a result of research consultations with epidemiologists, infection control specialists, and lessons learned during the design, construction, equipping of a number of health facilities. As we all know, as defined by the US Center for Disease Control and Prevention, COVID-19 can be spread in three main ways: person to person via direct control, person to person via airborne respiratory droplets produced when an infected person coughs or sneezes, and surface to person via contact with surfaces or objects that hold the virus, followed by an individual touching their mouth, eyes, or nose. Now, having defined how COVID-19 is spread, it makes it easier to identify ways in which we can mitigate the spread of COVID-19 in the design of our health facilities. A health facility, a hospital, essentially has a lifespan of 50 years. Now, beyond that, you need to completely modify it. But between 0 and 50 years, there's a constant change because new diseases come in. We also have new equipment. We have new forms of treatment, and all these have to be factored in. So waiting areas, and let me talk about after adaptability. Let's look at waiting areas. Waiting areas should be designed to accommodate smaller groups of persons in the same space. Now, hospital layouts should be designed with larger open green areas, large windows to let in sunlight, as the virus does not appear to thrive well in sunlight. Again, as part of the therapeutic process, health facilities should allow patients to have views and access to gardens, water fountains, and other design features. These all help in healing them. A lot of the disease is spread by touch. So we need to increase the use of touchless technology. We're looking at voice-activated elevators, doors with motion sensors, hands-free light switches, and ventilation and heating controls, taps and faucets with motion sensors. Again, the use of antimicrobial material, which are effective in the elimination of harmful microorganisms, will cut down on indirect transmissions. Ventilation of buildings is another important area. Now, we have to design for increased fresh air intake, as this dilutes airborne contaminants and decreases transmission rates. Now, any air that is brought into built facility should have high efficiency particle air filters. Now, these are capable of removing at least 99% of particles that are 0.3 microns or larger. In addition, these filters remove dust, bacteria, fungi, and vapors, and are also known to capture viral particles spread by droplets. The use of negative pressure is also quite important. Now, we need to do this by introducing the fresh filtered air into the corridors, which are clean areas, and then we suck them out into the room so that infection is not spread from contaminated or infected patients into the corridors. Humidity is another thing we have to look at, and an optimal range of 40 to 60% can be attained. Now, this we can even do now by using portable humidifiers. They would increase the humidity because the virus works well in areas of low humidity. Hand washing is another thing that we have to do. And as architects, we need to design consciously such that persons are directed and encouraged to wash their hands before entering public spaces. There is an increased use of telemedicine, which will reduce visits to the hospitals. And I listened to the Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, addressing the 76th session of the UN General Assembly on September 21st. And he said that elderly persons will make up 22% of the world population by 2050. Now, what this means is that as architects, we need to design for barrier-free access for the disabled, the elderly, and the frail in affordable housing programs, which will avoid them making non-essential visits to the hospitals. The last point I want to make before I take you through one project to illustrate what I've been saying is we have to work on our preparedness and early response to disease outbreak. We need to explore methods of rapidly constructing health facilities, methods of quickly changing and adapting existing health facilities so they can respond to unexpected disease breakout. We also need to educate more architects in public health because a lot are interested in other more, I'd probably say, lucrative type of thing rather than public health, which may not necessarily be financially beneficial. Again, outside the design of hospitals, we need to look at the introduction of preventive measures in the areas of sanitation in the communities. Now, this list is not exhaustive. There are quite a few points, but this is what I'd like to talk about. Now, it's important for us to understand that just as the virus mutates, we also have to be constantly adapting our designs to keep pace with the virus. It's a challenge which I think we all have to embrace. I'd like to share my screen with you and take you through the Infectious Diseases Center, which we did last year. Where we just a minute. Yeah, here we are. Okay, can you see my screen? Hello?
Yes.
You can see the screen. Okay, so this center was built in response to COVID-19 and was built between the months of March and June last year. And now it was built within the precinct of a hospital that had just been completed, a district hospital, but was not in use. So the white top buildings, the white roofed buildings, is what we put up for the COVID center. Now, in doing this, the major challenge we had was to separate healthy people from infected people. And the healthy people are in the green area and the infected people are in the red area. Now, to move from the healthy zone to the infected zone, you need to don your personal protective equipment. Then you do whatever you have to do. And then when you're going back to the healthy zone, you have to be decontaminated. So it's a very simple thing. Now, this translated into this bubble diagram, we translated it into this building. So what we have here is a top wing in green, which is the medical block. It has a 2.5 level laboratory, offices, conference rooms, changing rooms. In fact, it's the administration part of the hospital, then a lounge for the staff. Now in white here, and there, these are courtyards which we put in there. And they're meant to bring in sunlight and make the place lively as it helps to heal people. The red zone is the area where we have the wards. And again, if you look here on the left bottom side, we have the decon area, which is for those that have been healed. They are decontaminated, given they are counseled, and then they come out into this green area, and then they exit into the world. Now, the staff come in through here, they don their PPE, and then they treat persons, and then they go out through the yellow line back to a decontamination zone, and then back to their lounge. Now, for an infectious disease center, the staff do not sit in there all the time. We have CCTV, and they monitor a lot of things remotely, right? Now, let me just jump quickly. Okay. So this is what a typical ward looks like. We have here, this is a nurses station, which is used occasionally. It has some emergency equipment here, which can be wheeled to the rooms when necessary. Now, this is one of the corridors. Now here, I'd like to point out that in these alcoves here, we have hand washing facilities so that the staff, as they move from one room to the other, can wash their hands. Now, we also had skylights which let in light even to the corridor. And then you can see the vents for air conditioning here using the negative pressure. As I mentioned, this was done in a very short period. And then to the method of construction we used here was a composite panel made up of expanded polystyrene core, and we had galvanized welded mesh on either side, and then we shotcreted on the two sides, and this was the concrete wall. It also served, we didn't have any columns at all in the building. Now, this system of building enabled us to finish the structure in a very short period. Again, This has it allows for design flexibility because we could cut out windows when we wanted. We has better earthquake resistance and the lower construction costs. The roof, the roof is also made of a composite panel where we had sheet metal roofing on top, and then there's an insulation in between, and then sheet metal at the bottom. Now here you can see a worker carrying a panel to put in place before the shotcreting takes place. And then both Dr. Chan and Maria Neira mentioned the green buildings, and I'm happy to tell you that this building, we use the Edge software to assess its energy and water savings. And we had 23% energy savings, 28% water savings, and the embodied element in the material was 31% less than conventional. So we actually did savings, and this has been classified as a green building. And indeed, as I said, when we set out to do this, we had intended to do it within 6 weeks, but there was a bit of scope creep, and there was also a refinement of the brief. So from the initial 60 bed, we ended up having it as 100 bed. Now, we, the staff that did it, call it 100 beds in 100 days. We worked 24 hours, day and night. It was designing and building, not design build, because the designs had not been finished when the contractor started working. The project was a collaboration, a very unique collaboration between the professionals in the built environment. We had the Ghana Health Service, we had the Ministry of Health, the Ghana Armed Forces, which provided logistics, the Noguchi Memorial Center, which directed us when it came to designing the laboratory, because this is a unique laboratory for infectious diseases. And then most importantly, the private sector fund provided all the money we needed for the project. And of course, the land came from the government of Ghana. So this is what we did last year just to combat the virus. And I'll just show you a little fly around the building so you can see what it looks like. We can see the courtyards in there with the planting, the white roofs we have, and then there's also the second courtyard, and the red buildings are the existing building. So in summary, this is what we have. We've tried to capture everything in a very short period. And I'd like to, at this point, thank you all for your attention, and I'd be ready to answer any questions that you have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Architect Dottie. I'm sure there will be questions at the end of the presentation. So if you can hold your thoughts, we'll come back to you. And now, Mr. Valdez, are you able to share your screen, and would you like to take over with the next presentation? And
you should be working now. I'll try to share it.
Thank you.
There you go. Okay, it's working. Thank you for inviting us to this webinar of the International Union of Architects for the World Architecture Day 2021. Like President Cortés said, the theme Clean Environment for a Healthy World is very timely now that the whole world is battling the adverse impact of climate change. Our Mother Earth is getting warmer, and this has extremely affected climatic patterns everywhere. We have been experiencing extreme temperature, severe flooding in most parts of the world, creating health problems like this health pandemic that has been affecting all of us, and many other calamities that many parts of the world are suffering now. Abating the impact of climate change is everyone's responsibility. And I would like to encourage all the architects in the world to also do their share. We in the forestry profession in the Philippines, the Society of Filipino Forester is spearheading a program that we call Carbon Neutral Program, where every Filipinos are encouraged to plant 100 trees to offset their carbon footprints. Trees absorbs carbon dioxide, they produce oxygen, and they temper extreme temperature. Carbon sequestration studies in the Philippines estimated that carbon dioxide sequestration by indigenous tree species ranges from 3.48 to 23.57 kilograms per tree per year, or an average of 10 kilograms per tree per year. Why did we do this program? The program was launched in June 5, 2016, cognizant to the 2015 Conference of Parties 21 held in Paris, France. In the conference, the Philippines committed a 70% carbon dioxide emission reduction as its intended nationally determined contribution to be achieved by 2030. In 2010, 1 trillion tons of carbon budget was estimated before temperature hits the 2 degrees Celsius benchmark. In 2020, the International Panel on Climate Change reported a budget of 460 billion tons of carbon dioxide, or 11.5 years of current emissions being committed to 1.5 degrees Celsius temperature rise. While limiting the temperature rise to 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels is the target, the aspirational or wished for objective of the agreement is not to exceed 1.5 degrees Celsius. This is because in the report of the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change Assessment Report that focuses on when the world might pass the 1.5 degrees Celsius and 2 degrees Celsius warming levels, has raised serious concerns that the world will experience. This includes extreme heat, rising sea levels, declining biodiversity, declining global fisheries, and at risk coral reefs, among others. On heat exposure alone, the half degrees difference can compromise an additional 23% of the world's population. And this is very alarming. The IPCC report uses a combination of historical observations, climate models, and an updated estimate of climate sensitivity to provide the best estimate that the world pass or temporarily reach 1.5 degrees Celsius somewhere between 2030 and 2035, depending on future emission scenarios. Now, for the Philippines, how much carbon dioxide do we emit? Based on the Worldometer in 2016, the carbon dioxide emission of the Philippines is equivalent to 1.22 tons per person, or about 126.47 million tons of carbon, based on a population of 103.7 million in 2016. Our target in the Philippines, as of May 2020, the Philippines has a population of more than 109 million. Based on a 2016 carbon dioxide emission data of 1.22 tons per capita, the country has an estimated carbon emission of 132.9 million tons, and we will be needing to plant 10.9 billion trees based on the assumption of the carbon neutral program that each Filipino will need to plant 100 trees each to offset their carbon footprints. Currently, the Philippines has a forest cover of 7 million hectares, or 44% of its forest lands. In effect, this will still require the planting of 3.9 billion trees on a 3.9 million hectares on a land to offset our carbon footprint. So in total, this would result into the sequestration of total carbon emission of 132 million tons once the planted trees reach the age of at least 1 year. Not only in the Philippines, planting trees is imperative, consistent with the other initiatives of reducing carbon dioxide emission in order to mitigate temperature rise, climate change, and keep our environment clean for a healthy world. The carbon neutral program is achievable. Our program is now being supported by all the professionals in the Philippines as mandated by the Professional Regulatory Commission of the country. And we have declared June 25 as our National Tree Planting Day of each year based on the partnership between the Society of Filipino Foresters, the Professional Regulatory Commission, and the Department of Environment and Natural Resources. And in support to this, there is a bill filed in the Philippine Congress called the Sustainable Forest Management Bill that will promote the protection of existing forest land areas for enhancing ecosystem services and plantation development for supply of raw materials. The bill is a national legislation that will also require local governments to develop parks and the real estate developers to assign 30% of green spaces and the preservation of heritage trees. Why do we need to implement the CNP? And as a conclusion to my presentation, the following are some of the benefits in implementing the carbon neutral program. The carbon neutral program enhances forest ecosystem services and socioeconomic purposes, opportunities. The program educates people on the science and value of forestry, hence allow for sustainable resource development. The notion that utilization of trees adversely affects the environment is false. In fact, it is otherwise. Water absorption and augments freshwater storage that abates in supply, the decline of supply as forecasted by environmental institutions. This also supports development requirements of cities and the countryside. The program also generates carbon stocks necessary for producing raw materials like wood and non-forest products. And currently, the Philippines is importing about 80% of its wood requirements and spends approximately $1.5 billion annually. The program also improves air quality. In 2018, a study by the World Health Organization said that there were 45.3 air pollution-related deaths of every 100,000 people in the Philippines. It was the third highest in the world after China's 81.5 pollution-related deaths and Mongolia's 4.8 deaths of 100,000 people. The program also deters through healthy forest ecosystems the occurrence of zoonosis or animal-to-human transference of disease similar to the coronavirus disease of 2019. As of October, Worldometer reported the 4.8 million deaths around the world out of the 235 million deaths infected by the coronavirus. The program also attenuates disaster risk like flooding and landslides, thereby protecting built-up areas and infrastructure investments of both government and the private sector. According to the Asian Development Bank, natural disasters in the Philippines between 2000 and 2016 caused over 23,000 deaths and affected 125 million people. The associated socioeconomic damage was about $20 billion with average annual damages of 1.2 billion. I think that ends my presentation, and I hope I was able to impart our simple initiative in neutralizing our nation's carbon footprints and in helping clean the environment for a healthier world. So architects, are we ready to plant trees and neutralize our carbon footprints?
Mr. Valdez, I'm certainly ready. I'm so inspired to go out right away and do this. So thank you so much for the presentation. I think it's great to have a large message, and then you gave us a very concrete example in the same way that architect Dottie did as well. We will come back to you at the end with questions. So if you would stop sharing your screen, and I would like to invite Ray Pentecost to give his presentation as the final presenter, and then time allowing, we will go to some questions, and if time allows, we could even take one or two from the audience. So Mr. Pentecost, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'm trying to switch this from this current view to the view where you can see the whole presentation. Well, I'm having trouble flipping it to the view that I want.
If you go back to the previous one, although we see the small slides on the column, we do see the large one. So whatever's most comfortable for you.
Here we go. I've just found it. Sorry. Can
Great.
everybody see the slide clearly?
Yes, thank you.
Excellent. Very good. Thanks. Well, thank you for letting me be a part of this. This is really a treat. I'm happy to be involved in World Architecture Day 21. This is what I want to cover today very briefly for the public health group of the UIA. We have a lot of exciting things happening, and I want to share some of that with you today so that everybody can see a place where they can help and get involved. I want to cover some practical realities first to set the stage, talk a little bit about the public health group priorities with the International Union of Architects in the coming years, our program specifically for 2022, and then end with just a thoughtful sort of perspective on design. So let me jump in right now and take over on practical realities. And I often challenge my architects with this question: can anybody name me a building type, a landscape project, an urban planning effort of any scale? Can you tell me about a project that does not impact the health of the people who experience it? And some people wrestle with that for a short time, but ultimately the answer is, of course, not. But not everybody thinks about it in those terms. A lot of people just take design for granted and don't pause to think about the impact. And the practical reality of this truth is that every professional working in design on every project they're developing in every practice anywhere in the world, and for that matter, every student learning how to do this, should be aware that their project impacts the health of the people that experience it. There's not a single project exempted from this impact. Now, on several levels, that's significant. It's significant, in my view, because of the professional and ethical liabilities that design professionals assume. I think that's important to recognize and acknowledge. You can't practice architecture and escape the liability of impacting people's health. That's a reality. Not everybody understands that. Not everybody has done the research on what that impact is or how to mitigate that impact, how to design better in light of that responsibility. But it doesn't change the fact that that responsibility exists. It's very real. And there's lots of work for anybody who wants to get involved, not just in educating professionals, but in reworking our curriculum, in training design professionals and health professionals to understand this relationship between what we design and the health that we impact. It's critically important for our professions to understand and grasp that. So where are the public health group priorities today? I want to make this clear because everybody involved on the panel and everybody watching, I hope, will see a place where they can plug in. This is the foundation of our thinking. Our thinking is that Hippocrates made this statement, or he's credited with making it, that the function of protecting and developing health must rank even above that of restoring it once it's impaired. You know, Hippocrates gets a lot of exposure in the medical community with the Hippocratic Oath and all of that. But if you look at this quote, you see very clearly Hippocrates was a public health person. So for the public health people on the panel, but public health was important. And we take this as a cue to what we teach in designing for health. We look at protecting, developing, and restoring health. And those are the three keys for organizing what we teach and what now the public health group recognizes as our span of influence. And we can call that the Architecture for Health Design Continuum. Across those three areas, we can find a way to impact almost any project that you want to discuss. And I can lay that out for you in general terms to show you how this can work in design. If you take those three areas, design that protects, develops, and restores health, you can make this a 2x3 grid, and it's very easy to grasp where your project, your interest, your activity belongs. And this typology becomes useful in communicating programs for national planning, for program development, for organizing research, organizing literature searches, organizing design efforts. You can take these three areas and think of specific building types where these activities happen. For example, a design that protects health. In simplest terms, you could think about a storm shelter. What kind of building would you design to protect the health of people in an extreme weather experience? That's very purposeful, very specific, very targeted design to achieve a specific protection of human health. If you look at design that develops health, it's easy to think about building types where that applies. You can think about schools, designing schools to develop intellectual health. And the neuroscience, those of you who follow this, the neuroscience on designing schools is amazing. The things that we are learning from research about how to design better schools, better learning environments, better learning experience for students in light of neurosurgery and improving education by design. That's significant. You look at design that restores health, you find the traditional health design conversation, buildings that restore health, healthcare facilities, hospitals, clinics, to some extent, nursing facilities. These are the facilities, the buildings that have design for the purpose of restoring health. But there's another dimension to this that brings us back to every project. And that's where you take these three areas and approach design philosophically. You can look at design that protects health and apply it. Several of you earlier in the program, I was making notes, but several of you mentioned indoor air quality, indoor crowding, temperature and humidity, air filtration. We want to protect health, and all of that body of research, all of those unanswered yet questions, all of those initiatives for further study live within this cell. It's design that will protect our health, but it applies to any building type. We want to do that, whatever the building type is. Design that develops better health. We see some wonderful emerging research. We know about designing cafeterias, for example, in a way that encourages people to make the right healthy choices instead of the unhealthy choices. We see research on air quality, improving the air exchanges, increasing air exchange rates above code, and the amazing impact that has on mental acuity and mental productivity in the workplace. Design that's restorative. we just heard about a presentation about letting light into a hospital because of the healing powers of light, the restorative powers of gardens. Healing gardens has become a very popular concept and deployed in lots of interesting ways. But the thing that to keep in mind, not only do these 6 cells begin to define a framework for understanding how design impacts health, but it works at any scale. You can take this and take it down to the design of a tool. You can take it up to the design of a city where multiple aspects of this grid are involved. I'll leave that for now, but it's where the thinking of the public health group is, and also, by the way, where the thinking of the Center for Health Systems and Design is, where I'm working at Texas A&M. The program for 2022 from the Public Health Group. Let me tell you what we're doing. 2022 has been declared by UIA the Year of Design for Health. This is cause for celebration. It's UIA's commitment to a worldwide focus on this issue for all of 2022. And I'm guessing it will continue beyond. But in that declaration, we have 4 aspects that I want to showcase to you. One is there's an advocacy for the use of evidence-based design. One of the earlier speakers, it might have been Dr. Nira, talked about tools are abundant, evidence of research abundant. You're right. And we are being encouraged by this mandate from UIA to deploy those, to use those. And I'm going to come back to that in just a second, specifically to what you said. One of the mandates in the proclamation to make 2022 the Year of Design for Health involves building an open access online digital hub. Very interesting when you try to do this, because you find yourself asking, well, do we just create a website and put everything relating to COVID or everything related to design or health on there? And then it's, well, how do we organize it? And what we're finding is that we need to be thoughtful about this, because the information requests, the curiosities of people varies widely all around the world by lots of different stratification approaches that you can take. But this is one of our main tasks, and we will sort that out and end up with a wonderful online repository of materials. The next thing we were asked to do was build an international research agenda. And again, for what? Different groups of people with different national societal developments and priorities and interest and cultural behaviors have different requests, different needs, different things they want to know more about. So building an international research agenda is anything but automatic. And we're finding that there's a great deal of work involved in reaching across national boundaries to people who are like-minded, but find themselves in different contexts. And finding those common elements to build an international research agenda, wonderful project, but not automatic. Again, it's requiring a fair amount of thought. Creating resources to help architects conduct research. Again, Dr. Nira, you mentioned the tools and the evidence. Those things are out there. But again, think about the differences in countries around the world. There are countries that are desperately interested in how to deploy the most sophisticated HEPA, ultraviolet, and multi-layered air handling system in an ultra sophisticated healthcare facility. And there are nations out there who are wondering, can you tell me how to find pure water? How can I collect water and purify it? How can I build power systems that get me to a basic level of care supply? And by the way, we open the windows in our facilities in our country anyway. We don't have this controlled air issue that you do in your country. So in all 3 of these lower areas, these mandates, the topmost being use evidence in all of these, all 3 of those looking at a planet have different priorities, and it's fascinating. But we are committed as the Public Health Group to bring that voice, that multinational voice online, and to address, what do you need to know? What are the research issues that we want to know more about? And how can we provide tools and evidence for practitioners to use? So that's our excitement. That's the big announcement. Already underway, the design competition for the logo for the Year of Design for Health. It launched in September 27. And here are the upcoming dates to keep in mind. November 15 is when the designs are due. So if you're interested, if you have a school that would like to participate, a firm that would be good at doing this sort of thing, we would love to hear from them. Those designs are posted online. Those guidelines are posted. And we will have an announcement by 15 December of the winners. We'll have a number of winners of different levels, but we want to recognize excellence throughout this competition. So 2022, Year of Design for Health. And we want everybody on the call to participate in some way. We'll have suggestions coming to you from the public health group in the days to come. I'll leave you with this, a final perspective. Some of you may have heard of Richard Jackson. Dick was, as far as we know, the only physician who has served on the national board of the American Institute of Architects. He is very, very committed to public health. In fact, his degree is also in public health in addition to his medical training. But he also has an honorary AIA recognition. And Dick is fond of challenging his architect audiences. Do architects and other design professionals consider themselves health professionals? And he lets the audience think about that for a minute, because most of them are architects. No, we design things. But bearing in mind my opening slide, everything we touch as design professionals impacts health. It's an ethical responsibility. It's a liability in some settings. It's an ethical responsibility. It's a duty to understand that impact that we create. And Dick then closes the question with, well, they should think of themselves as health professionals because they are. And indeed, we do impact the health of everyone who experiences our work. So I'll leave it with that. I'm hoping there will be some questions, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much, Ray. It's been a pleasure to listen to you. And again, I'm so impressed because we've had very general points of view that have caused us to think on a global scale. And then presentations such as yours that have pointed out that there are many differences and that we should also keep in mind different priorities and depending on the situation. Let me throw out one question, and I was inspired when Dr. Chan was speaking, but this is a question I think anyone can answer, so I'll put it out there to all of you. Dr. Chan, you spoke about the need for collaboration and that architects should work closely with politicians, with public health officials, and sort of get in at the beginning of the process. How can architects do that? It seems to me that on one hand, they may want to, but they're not always invited in. On the other hand, if I listen to someone like Ray, who seems to take a more entrepreneurial attitude, maybe they should push their way into the processes. Mr. Dottie spoke about public health, and maybe it's not as lucrative in terms of honorarium. But if there's a demand, then honoraria rises. So how can we increase the demand for having architects participate? Is it the role of the client? Is it the role of the architect? Is it the role of the government? Dr. Chan, do you want to take a first stab at that?
Yes, thank you, Marsha. I think that was a very pertinent question. And I would like to congratulate the organizers for this very inspiring discussion. And I just would like to jump onto the last point by Ray. You talk about, every architect should be planning for health. And in fact, for your information, we in public health has a saying. We say that every minister within the government should be a health minister. That means when they make the policy decision, they must wear the health lens. Think of whether you be the architect or the educator or other sectors, you must have health in all policies. And this is, to me, we public health community is advocating. And in fact, the fact that I have retired from the World Health Organization. I have taken on board a new job, and that is becoming the founding dean of the School of Public Health in Tsinghua University. And I was actually introduced to this meeting by our architect in Tsinghua University. And this is what I've been promoting within the university. We must work across sector. We must work across disciplines. And then, of course, as a university, we can tender advice based on science, based on evidence. And it would be wonderful if, we have all these important ideas that are coming from different sectors. I was very struck by the carbon neutral program. And thank you so much for what you're doing in the Philippines. And of course, hospital systems is important because it accounts for about 10% of the greenhouse gas emission. So getting the hospital right is, an important dimension. So health in all policies, and every minister within a government should be a health minister. So for the architects, well, depends on the context. By that, I mean depends on the country. You need to reach out and really talk to the big guns within the government to say that you have a contribution to make. And this is the time. Now that COVID-19 is a big wake-up call, and every government is struggling. Every government is finding and accepting ways and means and suggestions to improve the health of people, because the environment, the economy, as well as the ecosystem are all interlinked. At the end of the day, it is a human being. Remember the people. I used to say that in WHO when I was a Director General. Remember the people. Actually, it doesn't matter what you are in. You are architects, but you can be in any other discipline. But you are serving the interests of people. Thank you.
Very much. Dr. Naida, do you want to jump in and talk about how architects can be part of that process that you spoke a lot about, transportation and city planning? But again, it's an area where they may be invited in, they may not be invited in. And I'm wondering, from your role at WHO, do you see how they can be invited into your organization? Or maybe you have a suggestion on a broader sense beyond your organization?
Thanks, Martha. And on the philosophical point of view, of course, we need to collaborate. This mantra of the health in all policies is, as Dr. Chan mentioned, this is absolutely in our DNA. So we are trying to convince anyone who can have an influence on thinking about the health of the people. And it's clear that any design, any architect will have an impact on the health of the people. Now cities are becoming the laboratories where our health is at risk or protected. So we need to work as responsibles of public health. What is happening at the urban level and how the urban and the cities are planned is very much critical for the health of our people and the well-being, because it will be determined there. How to contribute in a very pragmatic and concrete way. We are taking to the COP a report that we call the health argument for climate action. And one of the key issues is about healthy urban planning. So I will be very much happy to have the opportunity to discuss. I understand that after this meeting, we will have a bilateral to look at opportunities for collaboration with my colleague, Tiago, and others. So José Luis, we will be very happy to follow with you and making sure that you are part of the network of different groups that we have already, like ICLE or C40 or UN Habitat, and so creating a collaboration with you and establishing this contact for us will be very, very rich. Third, I will appreciate any opportunity you have in fora like this one to present our different tools like AQ Plus. You know, AQ Plus is how we do the assessment of how air pollution is impacting the health of the people and what are the sources of pollution. Well, many of the sources of pollution are coming from the architectural design and the city planning and the mobility and the transport. On transport, we have heat, which I'm sure you know as well. So if we have any opportunity for putting the two communities together, your architects and our public health and environmental health people, we will really appreciate it to make sure that at least you are very much aware of the tools, which might be the case, but how we can then plan. And then we have an initiative which is called the Urban Health Initiative, and we just tested it in Ghana and Nepal. But of course, in as many cities where we can go for it, it will be the best. On transport, we are part of the different networks, and joining efforts on that will be really very good. On training as well, I think it will be fantastic if the architects could have a little bit of training in public health at the same level that maybe we need on the public health community. We better more and more equipped on urban health planning and how to use that opportunity to discuss with the mayors and the governments on influencing different policies on that. So very happy to have you on board. This is just at the beginning, but it will grow very much, and I'm sure there will be a very useful and powerful collaboration. Over.
Thank you, Dr. Neda. Absolutely, that within architectural education, to have an understanding of public health and what it means, but also in medical education to have a minimal understanding of the impact of the physical environment, not only on health, but on many other aspects of society. Mr. Valdez, I have a question for you. I think you gave very specific examples about planting trees to reduce carbon dioxide in the Philippines. And I really appreciated that you gave very specific facts and figures, but maybe that's not the only thing. As you know, Iceland now has a carbon dioxide capture plant, and it's an experiment. It seems to be quite successful, although it's very minimal. Have you looked at that, or are trees enough to reduce carbon footprint, or do we have to do more?
Yeah, I think we have to do more, not only trees, but of course, we also have to look at the marine environment where the fish and the oceans also absorbs carbon dioxide. And, the other things is not only trees, but in the use of wood. I was supposed to reply on that first question. Collaboration, I agree, is very important across professions. And as foresters, we would like to promote the use of wood in all the construction activities, at least where it can be useful. Because if you cut trees, you stock the carbon. Then you plant trees again for them to absorb carbon dioxide. Of course, also in the urban planning, in landscape architecture, we know the trees that can absorb more carbon dioxide. So in the Philippines, we have a very good collaboration with the architects. In fact, they are all supporting the carbon neutral program. It was spearheaded by architect Yolanda Reyes, who is one of the commissioner of the Professional Regulatory Commission. Actually, he was the one who championed the carbon neutral program for all professionals in the Philippines.
Mr. Valdez, I'm going to push a little bit more. What about the developers in the Philippines? Are they people who have taken up the torch along with your organization or architects, or are they still in a position that if not adversarial, maybe not understanding the importance? How do you see that?
All of them are now getting into, realizing the need for planting trees. in most of the urban planning, like if you know architect Palafox, he is one of the key, June Palafox, one of the key architects that has developed several areas all over the world. And environmental protection has been one of the key considerations in all the planning that he has been making.
Thank you. And Architect Dottie, what is the relationship between passive measures and some of the great measures that you spoke about in the project in Ghana and technology? And can we find a balance? Is this possible?
Well, yes, we can actually find a balance, but I would like to come from the angle that what is important at this stage is to see that we're being driven by the unexpected, right? So the passive means, yes, will work, but we need more to look at the active means, active methods, active systems that will enable us to control infections. The passive ones work, but there should be a greater emphasis on the active ones. I'd look at it that way, definitely.
I think we lost Dr. Nader. I don't know if she was saying goodbye or she had a comment about that, but Dr. Nader, if you've had to leave, thank you so much for being with us. Ray, getting back to you, yours was very inspiring, very positive, but you as well are an architect. How do you see architects becoming more involved in public health? I mean, we have great examples of history and hospital design that were in the forefront. I know looking back at Venice centuries ago, they were able to quarantine people. I have an example in my own home city of Madrid of a hospital designed in a star shape so that wings were separated based on disease and types of illness and needs of patients. And this was done at the beginning of the 20th century. How do you see, how can we get architects, how can we get accrediting organizations for education? How can we move people to get a deeper understanding and give our architects a larger role?
It's a great question, Martha. Thank you. I think we'll see progress on at least two fronts. I should say, I think we're already seeing progress in that direction on at least two fronts. And it's wrong, I suppose, but I see the world through my own experiences. And when I left architecture to study public health, I couldn't get enough of it. The relevance, the connection, the utility of it in what I wanted to do with my career was so obvious and so compelling, and frankly, so interesting. I couldn't get enough. And that's why I stayed in school so long. But I see two areas where things are happening. One, and the public health folks will get this immediately, the epidemiological triangle, the agent-host environment triangle. The design community has become aware in a way that I don't think it has maybe ever been aware, that public health is the driver behind these, the headlines in the news every day, and it's the driver in what we're doing in design. You take an agent like COVID, and the goal becomes, how do you prevent the spread of this highly infectious disease? And it's, what can we do with the host? What can we do to protect the host? And we put masks on them. And we say, well, 6 feet is a pretty good distance to keep the agent from reaching the host. So let's create environments that have a 6-foot gap where people can space themselves. And then when we have an environment where people have to be contained, let's see what we can do to filter the environment so that the agents are either trapped or killed or expelled or diluted. We do lots of tricks with controlling the environment, but architects are beginning to see, I'm just acting on this epidemiological triangle. I'm actually impacting people's health and the spread of disease with this simple agent host environment model, this simple way of thinking. I'm participating in that. And I think architects are beginning to get that that's the world they're living in. It's exactly what they're doing. So I see that progress already. And I also see growing interest in understanding public health, the idea that architects can become involved at a different level. They can get involved in policy. They can get involved in an advisory capacity. Architects are realizing that sometimes a new building is not the answer. Sometimes it's modifying an existing situation or providing counsel or guidance to somebody trying to navigate a difficult situation where disease is prevalent. The other thing that will come out of this, and this is kind of exciting to me, the second big thing that I think will come out of COVID's impact on the design community is people have realized that what a lot of militaries call austere medicine worked just fine. We spent a lot of time in the design community learning how to create the ultimate environment with the ultimate air handling and the ultimate utility support and gases and positive and negative pressure and all sorts of wonderful things. And they are all pretty wonderful. But what we learned from COVID was that in a really challenging situation, something pretty austere, pretty basic, a curtain in a giant arena, a little curtained off area with a cot is a whole lot better than nothing. And we learned how to make that work. And I think one of the things that will come out of this COVID experience in design is architects are going to start to ask, do we have to have healthcare facilities that are so ultra extreme, amazing buildings? Or could we get by with something more austere and have that cost differential to apply to public health issues with far greater impact in return on investment? If you look at immunizations, at fresh water, at clean air, the return on those dollars is significantly greater than the return on patients in buildings that cost a fortune. So I think you're going to see an awareness of the agent host environment as a design model. People are getting it now. And I think you're going to see a lot of questions asked about austere medicine as a viable alternative that would free us up to put resources on other things that are impacting our health as well.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Pentecost. It's doing more with less. And that connects so well with the architect's mind of having parameters and finding creative paths within those parameters. We have a few questions from the audience. There's one, and this can go to anyone. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Dottie, would you like to respond? Please go ahead, and then I'll have a question from the audience. Please go ahead, Mr. Need to connect your microphone, Mr. Dottie.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So yes, I just want to summarize, join a few dots. Dr. Chang said in her place that all ministers must be ministers of health. To sum up, I think all architects must see themselves as doctors. Doctors in the sense that they should involve themselves more in the preventive building in such a way that we impact on the preventive aspects of medicine rather than waiting till people fall sick and then we look at the curing them. So this is just what I wanted to touch on, that My takeaway is all architects must see themselves as doctors. Every building we put up has an impact on our health, and this is very important. Thank you.
No, thank you. And here's a question from the listeners. Many modern building materials emit toxins which impact indoor air quality and other aspects of health. Yet these same materials are often used to make buildings more energy efficient. One example that the audience members cites is foam insulation. And how can our design systems balance positive and negative impacts? So who would like to take that question? I think, José Luis, you haven't spoken, so let's hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you, Martha. Well, first of all, I want to thank Margaret because it was an excellent presentation. You know, the keynote presentation was fantastic. And all the other presentations, Ray, Tommy, Richard, Maria, and a great conductor as is Martha, have been this webinar very successful. I think that if we want to collaborate, if we want to participate together with United Nations in cleaning our planet, you know, we have to make a schedule for the next 10 years or next 20, but at least year by year, how can we, you know, go ahead, you know, monitoring what are the main assets that we are getting? Because if we don't put specific targets, you know, at different levels, example, a local level, each one of ours has to participate in our neighborhood, in our hometown, because the difference between Asia, Africa, Latin America is very strong, and that's why the situation is clear that we are in a different environment. But one thing that is clear is that everything is architecture. You know, the society sometimes they don't notice that everything is architecture. The place where we are born, either our house or in a clinic, the school, the hospital, you know, the church, the theater, the public buildings, the office buildings, and so on. So good or bad architecture. So we have to work hard in trying to do excellency in architecture. And architecture is a great responsibility. And we have to work together with the other sectors. You know, example, the educational sector. You know, the children from the primary school, they have to be conscious that what are the main priorities in their own city, you know, and how can they collaborate? The same teachers, professors, in the health sector, all the doctors should be very, very aware of the importance of architecture. And the politicians, all these sectors have to be crossed. But I think we architects have to be more proactive. Nobody is going to invite us to participate. We have to do it ourselves, pushing, you know, in according with our own possibilities, the people that takes the decisions in order to make better decisions day by day, and to help them to monitor, you know, monitoring what we want to get in the next 10 years. It's the only way I can see that we can really be satisfied in the future, that because otherwise will be what our activist Greta Thunberg said, blah, 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 blah. So we have to stop blah, blah. And we said, my actions in this year or next year or for the next 10 years are this. And how can we collaborate with all the other professions to get those targets? I believe so. Thank you, Martha. And Union of International Architects has a big role for that. No, that's why we are going to continue working on these webinars. I want to invite you for the next webinar will be on the topic of housing, the middle of December this year. And next year we will have several ones as well. So give us ideas. What are the main topics that you think we should face in for the next year, that is design and health year. So we need all of you. Please we have to be in contact, and thank you for your wonderful words.
Thank you so much, José Luis Cortés. It's always a pleasure to hear your ideas and energy, and also where the UIA is going. We're almost at the end of our time. And so I would like to thank all the participants and say that you have inspired me, especially hearing about the connection between health, environment, health professionals, the design professionals, and how that working together, you will expand your field and we will expand the field of architecture, so that there's not just one definition, but it's a much more all-encompassing definition. And hopefully Dr. Chan and I, through education, will help to encourage people to become responsible leaders in their fields in the future. And if I could ask each participant on this very special World Architecture Day, what would you like the headline to read? If you could have one inspiring thought or one headline that you would like to see in the newspaper today or tomorrow. It doesn't have to be real. It can be one that's something particularly close to your heart. Then if we could begin, Dr. Chan, could you give us your headline for World Architecture Day today or tomorrow, or in 10 years down the road? But to close out, we'll go around and have a final thought on the part of each speaker. Dr. Chan?
Thank you for the opportunity. And I think, can I borrow one of the phrases? 2022, the UIA Year of Design for Health. Can I just add health and well-being? So you should, think of 2022 is the year for the design for health and well-being. That's the headline I love, okay?
Thank you so much. Architect Richard Dottie, would you give us your headline for today, tomorrow, or 10 years from now, whatever time frame you feel?
Public health, the way to go.
Mr. Valdez.
All right. The architect's honors to cleaning the whole world, making the whole world carbon free in 2040.
Thank you so much. And architects have so many tools and so much to share in that field. And thank you for what you're doing through your organization in Philippines. Ray, you've had some wonderful phrases. What would be your headline?
Architects are changing the world, designing as health professionals.
Hear, hear. I'm with you on that one. And José Luis, would you like a headline?
Thank you. Well, UIA can help very much to clean our planet.
Thank you so much. And once again, to all our speakers, I can't tell you what an inspiring and wonderful webinar that you've allowed me to host. Thank you, José Luis Cortés and the UIA. Thanks to our translators and the team behind the scenes. And I hope that we can do this many more times, because clearly the issues that UIA is addressing are really profound and they need constant collaboration and dialogue. So thanks for starting the conversation. I look forward to December. And thank you again, speakers and President Cortés.
Thank you, Martha.
To the listeners.
Bye-bye, bye-bye.
Thank you, Margaret. Thank you, Ray.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Tommy, Richard, Maria, everybody, all the organizers. Thank you very much. all the translators, thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Let's keep together.